You know that moment when everything goes quiet and you feel like God has stepped away? John felt that too, alone on an island forgotten by the world. But it was there in the place of pain that heaven opened, and maybe today, that same presence wants to visit you too. There are places where no one hears us, but God speaks louder. On that lonely island, John had no crowds, no applause, only the sound of the wind and the echo of his own prayers. And it was there, far from everything and everyone, that he understood. Exile isn't the end. It's the stage where God reveals what the world can't understand. Patmos was dry, cold, and lonely, but inside him burned something the isolation couldn't extinguish, the flame of faith. John had no temples, but he had communion. No company, but he had presence. And it was that presence that began to turn pain into revelation. How many times, Lord, have I felt exiled too? Far from everything that once made sense. But now I understand. The silence of the desert isn't punishment, it's an invitation. It's the place where your voice finally has space to be heard. Like John, I learned that your move doesn't depend on the setting, but on a willing heart. Even surrounded by rocks and sea, he never stopped worshiping. Because those who truly know you don't need an audience, they just need your presence. And it's in that moment, in the middle of loneliness, that something begins to change. Heaven bends toward earth, and the invisible becomes more real than the wind itself. There are days when the burden feels heavier than faith. John felt the weight of distance, the fatigue of years, the silence of the heavens. But even tired, he didn't stay silent, because those who truly love God pray even with a torn heart. It was in the middle of longing and pain that he learned to turn tears into a spiritual language. Lord, how many times have I also found myself trapped on islands I didn't choose? Islands of rejection, fear, injustice. Places where time feels frozen and the soul cries out for answers. But it was right there, in what seemed like punishment, that your spirit began to whisper something new. John looked at the horizon and saw only the sea, but your plan, Lord, was beyond the waves. While he waited, you were preparing revelation. While he suffered, you were shaping purpose. Man's waiting is never God's silence. It's the time of divine refinement. And when everything seemed meaningless, the sound of your spirit broke through the wind. A voice, steady and gentle, saying, "Write what you see." What was once pain became direction. Exile turned into mission, because that's how you work, Lord. When the world forgets us, heaven chooses us. And in the moment John surrendered completely, the impossible began to move. There was a time when John believed the silence would last forever. No visions, no answers, only the sound of the wind and the weight of his own solitude. Night fell over Patmos like a cold cloak, and every shadow seemed to whisper that God had forgotten him. But it was in that very darkness that revelation drew near. Lord, there are moments when I feel that same emptiness. I pray, and nothing seems to change. I wait and everything stays the same. It's as if heaven is too far away and faith too small. But what John lived teaches me this. When heaven goes quiet, it's because something great is being prepared in silence. It was there, between fear and hope, that a light pierced the darkness. John fell to the ground, overwhelmed by awe and divine presence. He heard a voice like the sound of many waters, and in that moment he understood. The God he thought he had lost had never left. He'd just been waiting for the right time to reveal himself. In that instant, exile turned into encounter. The cold ground became an altar. The wind that once carried despair now carried glory. Pain became presence, and isolation became communion. And it's in that collision between the human and the divine that John's soul awakened to something greater. The Spirit began to open his eyes, and the island that held him captive became the gateway of revelation. Suddenly, what was once a desert became a temple. The sound of the sea faded, and the voice of God echoed within John's soul like a gentle thunder. Do not be afraid. Those two words carried everything: healing, renewal, and promise. Because when God speaks, even what was dead inside us starts to breathe again. Lord, this is where I finally understand that your power doesn't arrive with noise, it arrives with presence. John wasn't rescued from the island, he was transformed on it. And maybe that's what you do with me too. You don't change the place, you change my perspective. The miracle begins when faith starts to see the invisible. Patmos didn't disappear, but it stopped being a prison. John's heart was filled with a fire that didn't come from the earth. He saw Christ glorified, eyes like flames, voice like rushing waters, and he understood. The same Jesus who once walked beside him now walked through his pain. Lord, what was isolation became intimacy. What was exhaustion became purpose, and the soul that once wept now sings. Because when your spirit descends, even the ground of suffering begins to bloom. And so, amid visions and promises, John rose different, not because everything around him had changed, but because something had been reborn within him. John was no longer the same man. What once held him down now held him up. The island that seemed like punishment became the place of glory. And he understood. The isolation the world gave him was the space God used to reveal himself. No human plan can stop what the Lord chooses to show to a surrendered heart. Lord, how many times have I questioned you in the middle of my own islands? How many times have I begged to leave, not realizing it was there that you wanted to transform me? Now I see it. Purpose isn't born in comfort, it's born in the desert. That's where faith stops being theory and becomes breath. John wrote Revelation not as someone afraid of the end, but as someone beholding the beginning of eternity. And I learned from him that every hidden pain in the present can be a disguised revelation, if only I look through the eyes of faith. Thank you, Lord, for turning my exiles into encounters, for using silence to reveal your voice, for making the same spirit that visited John on that island rise within me, the spirit that comforts, reveals, and renews. And if someone asks me today what I've learned in the middle of my solitude, I'll answer, I've learned that I'm never alone, because even when the world isolates me, heaven finds me. If this prayer spoke to your heart, like the video, share it. Subscribe to the channel, because here, with every prayer, heaven comes a little closer to you.